Welcome back to the Be Ruthless Show. I'm your host, Sam Ruth, and joining me today is Sonny Von Cleveland, a motivational speaker, coach, and activist who is passionate about sharing his story to aid and inspire people to choose growth from adversity because he has done just that. As a child, over the course of 5 years, he was the repeated victim of sexual molestation by multiple men, which led him to become an angry adolescent that saw him incarcerated at age 16 for 18 years. Since his release, he has mentored and worked with hundreds of individuals to encourage them to own their stories so that they too can recognize they have a choice. They too can choose to live in victimhood, or they can choose to forgive, let go, grow, and empower themselves to live fulfilling, meaningful lives. His core message is that it's not what happens to us or what we have done that defines us. It's how we choose to move forward and grow that matters. Isn't that the truth?
So true.
Thank you so much for being here and
Thank
being
you
one
for
of the people
having
who is
me.
so open, right? In a world full of so many people who hide.
There is so much negativity and fragility in the world, and people are just scared to be themselves and be emotionally vulnerable. And I think it's incumbent upon us that have walked through it to try to help other people understand that it's okay to be vulnerable.
Hello, Amos. Thank you so
My
much for
boy.
having people join us. I don't know how to do that ahead of time, so you're teaching me. It's difficult to do because we live in a world full of judgmental and critical people.
Ain't that the truth?
So, you and I mean, I don't care what people think, but a lot of people do. And so, how is it so easy for you to just share openly?
Well, I have come to learn in through my experiences in life that our voice is the one thing that separates us from the rest of existence. We are the only species on the planet that can use our voice to have conversations and to articulate thoughts and emotions. And the more you speak about something, if any of you have ever been through a traumatic incident before, and I'm sure most of us have, most people experience tragedy and trauma in their lifetime. And sometimes it's hard to talk about. The reason it's hard to talk about is because it's a painful emotion and we fear judgment of other people. And when we learn that using our voice is the healing mechanism that we have been given as human beings, the more you talk about it, the easier it is to talk about. And that's because that's healing. That's what healing is. And so it becomes easier to speak on and easier to say. And then the double fold blessing of learning to use your voice is that those that are listening will be inspired to use their voice as well. And they can share and they can feel comfortable sharing their experiences in life. And then that's how we all grow.
And connect, right? We are not the
Facts.
only ones who have been through we are the only ones who have been through our story, but others have been through something similar, and we all feel alone when we deal with it privately and silently. And when we start sharing, yes, it is the path to healing, but we also find others who have been through something similar to connect with, and then we don't have to go through it alone.
Right. Right. Everybody has a unique path, but there has been somebody in existence that has lived it before. And so doing research on others' lives, reading autobiographies or research on other human beings in history that have used their voice, or if they couldn't speak, maybe they wrote and they've left writings, and we can go through it and we can find an empathetic correlation between other people and us that have been down similar paths and learn what they did. It's not necessarily like when I speak or I write a book or I'm doing something, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm not telling you how to heal your trauma. I'm not telling you use XYZ and these three secret keys and these five magic formulas or these 24 awesome steps. I'm telling you the story of my life, the experiences that I've gone through and the trauma that I've endured and how I went through it. And in hopes that someone that hears it or reads it or sees it can say, wow, I went through a similar circumstance and I don't know how to process that emotion. maybe I can just learn from what this guy did and I can try what he tried. And if it works for you, then what I endured was worth it. It's a blessing. And if it doesn't, keep searching. Don't stop. Look at somebody else's perspective. Maybe somebody else endured a similar trauma that we endured, and they have a different perspective that worked for them. And then maybe you can employ parts of that, or you can take bits and pieces and use it. The answers are always out there. There's always an answer. It's just a matter of how willing you are to dig to find it.
You've been through so much that individually is judged. You put it together. There's so many topics alone that we could dig into. 16 years incarcerated. A lot
18.
of people, 18 years.
Yeah.
18. A lot of people come out, go right back in.
And I was one of them. I was a 2-time loser. So I went to prison when I was 16. And I caught my first felony when I was 7 years old. And I often look back and think, how do you convict a 7-year-old of a felony? And all it was I broke into a church. And it's funny because I talked with my mother a couple of days ago and asked her about the scenario. It's funny how two people that were in the same scenario or same situation have different viewpoints. I thought that I had just broke into a window and went in and stole a couple pudding cups and some playing cards. But my mother informs me that it was a food pantry drive that they were having where we went because we were really poor. So we went to food pantry drives to pick up, government cheese, government peanut butter, and some food and whatnot. And apparently after that is when my brother and I had broken in because they took everything down to the basement. And so we had broken in to get the pudding cups and the playing cards. And then we got caught. We were in a dugout in a baseball diamond, and a couple of police walked up and arrested us. And I mean, I'm still processing the new information that I just found out, but my mother didn't even realize that I was charged with the felony. To this day, she didn't know. And I'm like, how is that kind of oversight even possible? Right? Like, it's on my record, 1988, breaking and entering. And I'm like, how did you miss that? And then I'm coming.
Like, and I'm professional. Like, how is a professional in the mental health field not called in?
And so it was such a series of unfortunate events because my uncle started to molest me when I was 5. And eventually I ended up telling on him because I was getting into a lot of trouble, and I was getting into trouble with the law. When I broke the law, the men that were molesting me went away. And I'm assuming it's because they didn't want the attention of the law around this little boy and thinking maybe this little boy is going to say something. So they would go away. And in my mind, if I break the law, these men go away. And so I continued to do it. The police were giving me disciplinarian attention, and I fell in love with that. These are men that didn't want to hurt me. They were trying to help me and tell me what to do, what was right. And so I would go into court. And again, I was a very outgoing, extroverted child, right? And I used comedy and making people laugh. I found at an early age that I could make people laugh. And so my uncle was molesting me. My mom's boyfriend was molesting me. One of her friends, Tim Klinger, was molesting me. And then another guy, Robbie, was molesting me. And so I'm being molested and passed around like a piñata to all 4 of these men. And in my mind, the only way to make them go away is to keep getting into trouble. And then I don't want to tell on anybody because I'm also a very empathetic young man. I'm a compassionate child. I don't want to see anybody get in trouble. I don't want anybody, I know what you're doing is wrong. And all of them have the stereotypical threats of a predator. If you say anything, I'll kill you, or I'll hurt your mom, or I'll hurt your family. And so out of terror, I'm not saying anything. And then I'm getting into trouble, and it's working for me because all I'm getting is probation. And so that type of consequence, I'm not learning anything. There is, and then they did put me into mental health when they ended up discovering that my uncle was molesting me. And all that did was traumatize me even further because the mental health specialists at the time were only grab these dolls and show me what your uncle was doing. And I'm still to this day, I try to figure out what sense does that make to make the child relive the trauma? It did nothing.
But there
Right?
wasn't, right. I'm talking way back, right? Like at 7 years old, you're acting out. We don't know then, but my job is to say, you're telling me something with your behavior. I know something's going on back then.
Right. You would think that somebody would say something is not right.
Right. You're
We need
telling, right? You're
right.
telling me something, but nobody got involved then. We messed up then.
Yeah. And it's pretty rough. And so if you fast forward to when I'm 15 years old, I'm just a bad kid at this point in my life. I have gotten comfortable breaking the law. And I feel like there's no consequences, just going to be probation. And then I broke into a safe in my school, in my high school principal's office, and I stole some money. And I got arrested. And when I went to court this time, the juvenile judge said, "I'm done with you, and I'm binding you over to adult court." And so it was a significant amount of money. And so they bind me over. And as soon as I get into adult court, the judge says, "I'm not even going to play with you. You have a horrible record. You're 15." I was 16. You're 16 years old, and you've got 10 or 12 felonies on your record. I'm done. And he gave me 6 months county jail. And then when I go to the county jail, the first time I've ever been taken away, and I'm sitting in there, the more charges come up. Fingerprints start matching. They start putting evidence together, and they start coming with these other charges that I've done. I broke into a house. I stole a pedal bike. And then they said, "All right, well, here's a lesson for you. We're going to make an example of you." And they sent me to prison, gave me 2 to 5 years and sent me to prison at 16. And that was the beginning of the downfall for me for the next 18 years of my life, or the next 12 years of my life, at least 13. And so when I went to prison, the very first week I was in there, I was raped by 2 men. They ran into the cell, and it was a very savage moment of my life. And it was in that moment that I determined I will never be a victim again. And I lost something, snapped, and I lost all sense of compassion, care, empathy for whatever anybody. I was just in a primal survivalist mode at that point. Like, I still have to do 5 years here. I have to figure this out. And I stabbed one of the guys. I just took some crude pencils, some little pencils that they had, and I just ran and just started stabbing him. And I mean, I didn't do a lot of damage. They're just little pencils, but there was blood everywhere. And I mean, it was savage enough of an attack that the other inmates that saw it thought that I was like this brutal gangster, right? Because they didn't know what had just happened. They didn't see them run into the cell and have their way with me. They just saw this white guy run across and stab the crap out of this guy. And so that reputation followed me when we left quarantine, because you're only in quarantine for 30 days or so. And that reputation followed me to the next facility where we got to the actual prison. And I saw a pathway of protection. The gangs that approached me were like, "Dude, I saw what you did. You're about your business, blah, blah, blah," and invited me to join the gang. And so I joined. And one of the first things I had to do was, "Well, you got to put in work, man. Here's a burner." They called them burners. That's a knife. Go over there and stab that guy. He's one of a rival gang. And without hesitation, I'm on it. Let's go. I need to protect myself. I just don't care. Went over, and I mean, I stabbed this guy a few times, and then I'm in. And then while being embraced by this brotherhood, all of a sudden, I mean, they act like they care about you, right? They feed you, they befriend you, and they have your back. And this whole time I'm falling in love with it. But on the other side, it's a gang, right? There's a lot of violence. There's a lot of fighting. There's this code that we live by. And so I'm now subjected to that. And then 2 years into the bit, they sent me to one of the first privatized youth facilities in the United States in Baldwin, Michigan. It was owned by a company called Wackenhut. And I spent 2 years in this facility until I was 20. So, and it was nothing but madness. It was a bloodbath. It was the most violent prison in Michigan 30 days after it opened. There were more assaults on staff, more assaults on inmates, more rapes. The worst prison in Michigan. And it didn't take long before they knew it was out of control, and they got to come in and fix it. So they would send in the CERT teams from Virginia and the Michigan Department of Corrections. and they locked it down, and then they exacted revenge on us. I remember being in the hole, being chained up to the showers and being beaten. I remember being a cell extraction where they gas you and pull you out of the cell, and they chain you and hog tie you, and they would take us outside and throw us into the dog kennels. And it's the middle of winter, and they would leave us out there for 5, 6, 7 hours, coming out, dumping water on us. And then, like, I lost these teeth because they came out and would just kick me in the face to make sure that I'm alive. And I get it. We were not good kids, right? We were bad young men that were provoking them. We're not saying that we weren't, but that level of abuse is ridiculous. And I mean, it comes to find out that this company has had to pay out $80 million to some of the inmates that were there. I didn't even know about the lawsuits or any of that. I had just kind of blocked it out of my mind. But when I turned 20, I left that facility and I went back to the Michigan Department of Corrections, and then fell in with some old school gangbangers. One of my bunkies was a founding member of an old 70s gang. And then at 21, they opened the door and said, here you go. You're free. No parole, no probation. You're $75, 3 condoms. Good luck. And I was more lost in that moment than I'd ever been in my life, because now I'm foisted back into freedom, except this time my mind has been trained to be a gangster, right? Like, I'm a violent, angry, self-centered, non-caring, unempathetic young man, and I don't know what to do with this. And so I was out for about 20 months, and I just wreaked havoc in the world. I mean, I got a couple of women pregnant. I was robbing drug dealers, breaking into houses, stealing everything I could get my hands on, because that's just the life that I knew. I had no type of self-awareness or intervention to understand the pain that I was causing to people. And so I was out for about 20 months, and then I got arrested again for it. And a whole bunch of charges came in, and was given 12 more years. And so I went back to prison at 23. And it hit me a little more profoundly this time, like losing my freedom again. And while I didn't change internally at that point, I had a son with the mother of my oldest son lived just a couple miles away from the facility, and we kind of patched things up and got back together. And she was going to ride out this bit with me, and she was bringing my son up in every week, and we would sit in the visiting rooms. And then about 2 years, 3 years in it, 3.5 years into it, I find out that my brother, I've idolized this man my whole life, he's been my bigger brother. I find out that they're having an affair, and she is now pregnant with his child, and that he is taking my son and going to raise him as his own, and that I'm not allowed to call anymore or have any contact. And that broke me. And that the one human being that I really cared about on this planet just did this to me. And I snapped. And shortly after that, somebody had ran into my cell and stole all my stuff. And it was a very violent altercation beyond that. And I was taken to the hole, solitary confinement, and I was given 5 years in the hole. And while I'm in the hole, when I just got there, before I knew I had 5 years, I was taken to the hole, and I'm wiping blood and pepper spray off of my face, and I hear a voice, "Hey, white boy, come talk to me." And I'm like, who is this? And I go to the door, and I look across the hallway, and it's this old black man. He's probably in his 50s with gray beard and got a do-rag on. And I snapped on him. What? Stop talking to me, bro. You, calling him, cussing him out left and right. And he's, all right, you're going to talk to me at some point. And for that whole week, every single day, 4 or 5 times a day, "Hey, white boy, come talk to me, man. Come on, man. Come on, man. Come talk to me, bro. I'm lonely over here, man. We all we got. Come talk to me." And so after a week, they took me down to see the Security Classification Committee. And that's when they said, "This guy is really messed up. You really hurt this guy." And they gave me 60 months in administrative segregation, so 5 years in the hole. And I'm like, I don't care. Whatever. What does it matter? And then I went back to the cell, and he called over again. "Hey, white boy, what'd they give you, man? What happened?" And finally, loneliness, all of that started to break in. And I'm like, "What, man? What do you want to talk to me about?" And I'll never forget it. He said, "Why are you so angry?" What kind of question is that, dude? Because I'm in the hole. My life sucks. I'm in prison. You won't shut up. There's a lot of reasons why I'm angry. And he says, no, no, no. That's why you're mad. Mad is on the surface. Anger runs much deeper, and you are an angry young man. And I had no response. Right. And I mean, it was one of the most emotional times of my life. And I mean, I'm tearing up now, just reliving it. Right. And it happens to me all the time. But over the next 19 months, this man changed my life. He showed me what compassion is, what self-forgiveness is, how to process emotion. And this is a man that in any other circumstance would not talk to me. We would not get along. He's a Moabite, Circle 7 Muslim, hates white people. We don't get along at all. And I'm from an opposing gang, right? Like, I don't like you either. And there was something about that solitude that we just connected, and the man schooled me. I was able to turn that 60-month sentence in the hole into 19 months because of I started writing essays, I started writing poetry, I started submitting these things. Sorry about that, to these intramural challenges and contests that they would have inside the penitentiary. And I started winning, and I started getting the attention of the administration. And they came to me and said, hey, we read this. You've done a lot of work since you've been in here. Would you be willing to teach this new class? It's called Thinking for a Change. If you will master this material and go teach this class, we'll let you out of the hole. Well, of course I'm going to do it. At this point, it's been 17 months. And I mean, I've done just an incredible amount of work. The first book this man sent me was Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, which completely changed my life. I'm looking at, sure, I've been raped, I've been molested. Can you please answer that phone? And sorry about that. I'm at my cat cafe. It's just my wife and I that run the cat cafe, and it's a little hectic. But I read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, and I'm looking back at my life like, yeah, I've been molested, I've been raped, I've been beaten, I've had a pretty traumatic life. But this man, and what Viktor Frankl did in his circumstances, and for those that don't know, he's a Jewish man who had his entire life taken from him. His family was taken away, all his possessions, his business, everything he had, and he was thrown into Auschwitz. And he's watching other Jewish people be slaughtered and just exterminated and tortured. And the whole time he's smiling and trying to inspire people. We can't control the atmosphere around us, but we can control the way we respond to it. We can control ourselves. And it was so inspiring to me. I'm like, I have been this angry young man for so long, and I don't have to be, right? I did it out of protection for myself in the beginning, and I put on these masks, and I just wore them so long that I forgot how to take them off. And he helped me to break through that, break those masks down, to relive my life, go back through and find these pivotal moments and understand the emotion, feel the emotion, and to let it out. I would wrap up my mattress and beat the hell out of my mattress, and it was an amazing experience. And when you read the book, I go much more in depth into that process. But that's where it was. And then I dedicated the rest of my life to trying to help people learn what I just learned, because it's amazing. The transition is incredible. The ability to change starts right this moment. You can stop everything bad in your life right now. And I didn't believe it until he showed it to me. And then I'm like, wow, you can just stop. You can just stop and live a great life starting right now. It doesn't matter where you're at. Environment doesn't matter. Sorry.
I'm blown away that 5 years in the hole. Like, I can't even believe that's allowed to be, right? I can't believe that they're allowed to give a 7-year-old a felony. Like, there's just so many things in this story that shouldn't have happened. The fact that you're sitting here responding positively and doing what you're doing is so amazing. So much of what I do is work to try to connect with the police, right? Because there should be a mental health professional on calls, because we interpret situations very differently than they do. They see aggression, I see anxiety. They see criminal, I see fear. We just see it differently. And this could have been an entirely different outcome I see a hungry child.
Sure.
Right.
And
Like, there could have been so many different ways to intervene from the beginning.
I try now. I work with the Palm Springs Police Department. I work with the Indio Police Department. I go into the juvenile facilities and mentor these juveniles. I work as a reentry coach in Los Angeles because of that very thing. There's a disconnect between police and criminals. And police are just trying to do their job. They're not horrible people. There are some bad apples, but there's bad apples everywhere.
Absolutely.
Right? Look at any apple tree. A huge percentage of them are crappy apples. Right. And that doesn't mean that the apple tree itself is bad. And so I think police officers, and especially corrections officers, what they need to they need to be taught the art of compassion, the art of empathy. It's not just about getting your job done. And I understand most police officers have the mindset of, I'm just trying to survive the day and get home. Right. And so compassion and empathy leave their mindset. They're not in that headspace. They're just trying to survive the day and make it home to their families. But we have to eliminate that fear. We have to get rid of that. But it's also on the side of the offenders, right? We have to get with the offenders. And that's why I think what you just said is so key. You should have a mental health professional on with these officers anytime that there's a call. And I understand that that's not really plausible everywhere in the country, everywhere in the world, because
we have phones. Like, I'm just not like I'm not going to accept that. I don't care, right? Like, there is a way. It's 2023.
There is a way. There's not a way to have somebody in person, but there's a way for a contact to happen.
Correct. Right.
On the ride to the jail, put them on the phone with somebody.
Right. You're 7, right? Get someone on the phone. And I'm not saying like all hungry 7-year-olds go out and do something wrong. You were hungry, though. Let's look at the root of this and where it started. There are 7, 8, 10-year-olds that are out there breaking windows and doing things for kicks, just for kicks.
Indeed.
That's different.
Indeed.
Right? Like,
but I still would not charge them with a felony. There's no criminal capacity. Part of prosecuting somebody for a crime is the elements have to exist, and there has to be criminal capacity or criminal content. And a 7-year-old doesn't possess that.
Right. Period. But there are some that are doing it because it's fun. There are people.
That's true.
There's a difference between we were hungry. And there are adults that break into places because they're hungry, right? Like, we do need to look at and maybe we need to find a solution.
You got to be kidding me.
Did we freeze?
There we go. Sorry. I think am I back?
Yeah.
All right. Sorry.
There are adults. We need to solve the hunger issues and make solutions, right? And then address the people who are out there doing it for giggles and breaking the law for different reasons. And so on those calls, officers, teachers, let's look at what the root issue is. And if you can't have someone in the car on the call, there's a phone, there's a way.
There is.
And I'm going into schools, I'm going into police stations. I'm not asking you to hire me and pay me, right? There are people in my field working hard to be on your team and volunteer and change
voluntarily,
culture, right? Well, they're begging,
right?
Having doors slammed in their faces. So you're a part of teams. Like, let's work together.
And that's the goal of my life. I have started a nonprofit organization out here called the Von Cleveland Foundation. I also have my own mindset coaching company called Itopia Coaching. And I have a 12-week, 8-module personal development curriculum that is the culmination of what I've done to save my own life and how other people can employ these things if they want to, because I don't tell anybody what you have to do. But here's the resource. The problem is it's expensive and people can't afford that. So I started the Von Cleveland Foundation as a nonprofit to provide mindset coaching free for people that need it, because these are the people that need it the most are the ones that can't afford it. They need it the most.
Yep.
And so how do we provide this? How do we volunteer our time for this cause? How do we jump in and help these people? Because there is help, right? The help is available. When I saw your show this morning, I'm blown away by what you were doing, what you were saying. Here's a safe space. Let's work together to help. Let's provide this for people because it doesn't cost us anything. It doesn't cost me anything to sit down and have a conversation with somebody. And if I can be of any service, that's why I'm here. It makes what I've endured worth it, right? To save a life makes everything that I've endured worth it. 100%.
Any officer, and like, so I decided I'm going about it the wrong way. Like you said, like I'm going to the head of the departments, right? I'm going, and I think those people are in the desks. They have been there so long. You're right. Like they're burnt out. I think they forgot why they got into it, right? I need to connect
100%.
with the young officers who love what they do, right? Anyone watching, anyone in the field, the HR department, like the head of the bureaus, whatever it's called. I'm going about it the wrong way. But there are officers who do care, whoever we can connect with. There are people just as passionate as we are.
No doubt.
The more of us there are, the louder we are.
And it starts with a share button. I mean, that's how people can do their part. Sharing is so big, right? You can just, because you never know who is in your social media circle that may need to hear this conversation, right? And be like, oh man, I just learned something. It's incredible. I'm actually going on my first ever ride along with the Indio Police Department on February 11th. And I think there's an opportunity to make a connection between police officers and offenders in that moment. That moment is such a critical time between when you arrest somebody and on the way to jail. That is such a pivotal moment right there, because even if you have to pay consequences for what you do. We make a choice. We have to pay the consequences, period. It's the law of cause and effect. But that moment when they're arrested is their most vulnerable moment, right? They're swimming in their emotion right now. They don't know what's going on. They don't know what's about to happen. They know they're in trouble. They know they messed up. Most of the time they're praying to some higher power at that point to help them get out of it. So they're very receptive in that moment to learning, to teaching, to any answer that might give me an out, that might help me to not suffer such a severe consequence. So they're receptive to learning in that moment. And if it almost comes off as common sense to me. How do we not think of? I mean, we think of everything. There's an app for everything. How do we not think about that moment? Is the most pivotal moment. And it comes from, I think, the judicial system in this country is it's modern day slavery and cattle farming. There's no reason for a private prison, period, ever. What is the point of a private prison? It's owned privately. It's a for-profit business, and it has recidivism of 77%. What business do you know can fail 77% of the time and still get support from the government? That doesn't make sense to me, right? These things exist, and we just ignore them because there's so much money involved. We're talking billions of dollars every year. There's so much money involved. They just don't care about people anymore. There's so many people that they just don't care. And it's also because of technology. It's because of social media. COVID had such a massive impact and set us back in the empathy and compassion game 50 years. We're trying to now repeal women's rights. There's no, like, we have just gone and got ourselves into one big crazy crap storm. And
well, you just hit on something, because my talk earlier was the same thing. That moment when someone loses something, right? That's when they need the support. That moment when someone gets arrested, the most. Exact same thing. Right. You're right. I agree completely. And we should have resources and things available then to prevent so many things that could go wrong.
Facts. And then they just throw kids away. Right? They lock kids up and throw them away. These mandatory minimum sentences are ridiculous, right? Like, you've got kids that sold drugs because they were starving, because their family is starving. And this is all they know. This is what their environment has been. This is what they've taught them. Kids are sponges. They will absorb everything around them and pick the path of least resistance for instant gratification. They don't understand the concept of delayed gratification because they've grown up in such an instant gratifying environment. They'll go out and sell drugs because it's immediate money, right? And then they get arrested. And instead of some type of intervention on a mental health level, or somebody coming in and saying, let's approach this with compassion and kindness, it's let's put this 14-year-old in prison for 20 years for selling drugs. What and the only motivation behind that is monetary. Sorry.
And it varies by where you live, right? In Michigan, I at least had a say. In Colorado, I have no voice. Zero, they don't care. You get pulled over, it is this charge. Here's what happens to you. Mental health professionals have zero input.
Well, Michigan threw me away. Michigan completely destroyed an innocent young man because of a lack of empathy and a lack of caring. Mandatory minimum sentence in Michigan is some of the most violent, sickening things I've ever seen in my life. I know men that are in there that are salt of the earth, great human beings, and were punished simply because the state wanted to.
And Michigan's better than here. That's what I'm saying. And Michigan's better than Colorado.
Which is crazy when you think about, because Michigan's bad. And if
that's
Colorado's
what I'm saying.
worse.
Has a long way to go. But Colorado, Michigan, I would kill to have it. And these laws.
Sure. And then here's the thing. We see the overwhelming odds that we're up against, and most people feel insignificant. They feel like we can't make a difference. Like it's so far gone that we have to allow the government to try to take care of it, or let some other entities or powers that be, not realizing that one person can start a movement of change that can change the world, that can change history. And we've seen it time and time again through it. Look at Gandhi. Gandhi is a prime example of that. Nelson Mandela. These men, they're single human beings, and they are no different than you or me or anybody else. I don't have any special powers that nobody else has. I don't have anything significant that was given to me. In fact, nothing was given to me, right? I walked through the fire and made the choice that no one should have to endure what I endured, and then to endure that, and on top of it, endure the criticism and the ridicule and the judgment that comes with serving your time, right? When you serve, and that's another huge problem in this country, is when someone serves their time, they get out, they're still treated like a pariah. You're still treated like a second-rate citizen because you made a mistake and you went and paid for it.
Absolutely.
You paid your punishment. You have sheriffs like Chad Bianco in California who are just so hard, right, strong on crime and punishment that, and you come out and you say things like, I have a duty to protect all citizens of Riverside County. When someone is released from jail or from prison, they are part of that all citizens. They are no longer a criminal. Until they make the choice to reoffend, they're not a criminal. They are a citizen, and they should be treated that way. But they're not. They're treated like pariahs. You should not have that stuff on job applications. You don't need to know why I got into trouble when I was 8 years old, or if I was 12 years old, or if I'm 15. If I'm 40 years old looking for a job, what I did when I was 22 should not matter. It doesn't matter. That's 18 years of difference. Look how much life changes in 1 year. And so somebody did 5 years ago they're gonna be raked to the fire for that.
It's stacked against you. There's so much. Instead of us helping you and having programs to increase the odds of your success, right? Like the budget programs, and this is where the money needs to be going, right? Just preach.
But here's the problem. If you invest the money into rehabilitation and resources that help people to change, then you lose the money for having them locked up. Private prisons have to close, right? Because you don't have any stock. So once you have no stock, you got to close your prison, right? And the state also makes a ton of money off of inmate. What is it? $32,000 a year per inmate that the government gets to apply for money for federal subsidy or whatever from the federal government to give me money because I have 2,000 inmates in here, and that's $32,000 a year, and so that's got to be paid. And there it is. And so they won't fix it. They don't want to fix it. And so it's up to people that have nonprofits like Homeboy Industries, the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, Dave's Killer Bread. These organizations that are built by men and women that have been through it, that come forth to say, this is wrong, and we are going to come together as a people and try to fix it. It's on us. The government's not going to do it. The Department of Corrections is not going to do it. The states aren't going to do it. It's on people like us that have the cognizant wherewithal to recognize the problem and do something about it. We can't just talk to each other. We have to do something. Right?
Talk about Hey White Boy while we still have some time.
Yes, it is. It's my autobiography. Yeah. It's been an amazing project. My wife and I decided to tackle it together. My wife is an amazing, amazing woman in her own right. And her story is just incredible. We met on a podcast.
How cool.
Yeah. She lived in England. She had a podcast called Boot Camp for the Mind and Soul. And I was a guest on her show. And it was the most real, raw, and vulnerable conversation I've ever had. It's actually when I was comfortable enough to talk about being raped. Up to this point, I had not talked about being raped in prison. And I was able to conquer. She made me feel so comfortable and safe. And we talked every day for months, 6-7 hours a day. She was going through a bad divorce. I had just left Satan's daughter. And we trauma bonded and then healed together. And we moved to California. We've opened up this here, Frisky Business Cat Cafe, because we're both animal lovers on a huge level. And so we have a successful cat cafe in Palm Springs. And then she said, it's time for you to write your book. Your story could really help people heal. And so we did. And she's ghostwriting the book. We have a process of we sit down together every morning for an hour and we go through a certain part of my life, and she asks questions, she takes notes, she records, and then she writes this magnificent it's amazing how she can take this, and she's just such a profound writer. And I mean, I read it and I get shocked. I'm like, it's almost like you were right there with me the whole time. And she agrees with me. She says, well, I was there with you the whole time, to be honest, because she's my star seed. She's my soulmate, right? We come from the same star. And so we have endured this life together. And she knows me so well that she's able to put in writing my entire story. And it blows me away. So I know that it's going to be such a profound book for people. And I'm humbled that my life meant something, that the pain and trauma that I've endured meant something.
We will support you here every way possible. Do you have a launch date?
September 1st. The ebook is already available for pre-order, and we are going through the formatting process as we speak, and it will be available for pre-order soon as well. But it does drop September 1st and will be available on all, and I'm recording an audio version, so I'll be doing the audio book with my own voice. I will be reading the book and recording it. So my wife tells me I have a good voice.
That's amazing. We'll put all that here, the link when it's available, the ebook now. Any other things going on that people should know about?
I mean, I do a lot of things. I do a lot for the world. Feel free to follow me on Instagram. I'd really like to blow up that platform, and because that's where I'm really trying to put the most reach. We have to go where the reach is, right? Because you and I are very similar in this. Like, we are both passionate about spreading this message and helping people. So we have to go where it's at. And so we have to support each other, right? We have to find people that are of a like mind and support them and push them forward. So you can follow me, Sonny Von Cleveland Official on Instagram. You can just Google Sonny Von Cleveland and there will be a plethora of things. So any support comments. I do a daily show 5 days a week on my Facebook, my YouTube, and my Instagram, where it's just about putting out positivity. I read from a daily Stoic book. I find positive news on positive websites, and I bring it out. There's so much negativity in the world, and mainstream media just emphasizes chaos. I go and I find the positive things. People, I get it every day. Did you see the new Trump indictment? No, I didn't. I don't watch that stuff. I saw the grandmas that are pulling up on park benches in Zimbabwe that are offering therapy to people that need it. I saw that. I saw the 12-year-old that is learning how to filter water for the people in India that don't have clean water to drink. That's the kind of news that I want to ingest, because our mind is just like our body. If we ingest crap food, we're going to have a crap body. If we ingest crap content, we're going to have a crap mindset. So we have to, it takes the same amount of energy to look up something positive as it does to look up something negative. Block negativity from your life. That block button's a beautiful thing.
Oh my God,
Block
I
it.
so love that. That's, I'm the same. Like you, I do not let you in my universe. If
Facts.
you are not allowed to enter. People know, like I block. I really do.
You have to have boundaries. Boundaries are so important. There's boundaries, folks. Have those boundaries and stick to them very harshly.
Oh my God.
Be kind, and kindness. Kindness is the end of everything. Kindness is the be all end all. It's the answer to everything. Self-kindness first, and then kindness to your environment is what does it. Kindness is all it takes. If you're kind to yourself, you will forgive yourself. If you're kind to others, you will forgive others. Kindness is all it takes. Be kind.
This has been amazing. We're getting the best comments. Thank you so much for your time, for being so
Thank
open,
you so much for having me.
for everything you're doing. Love that we've connected. Everybody listening, always be ruthless.